And these guys know. It's a terribly difficult position. I'll tell you, the pressure that's being put on Evo Morales right now, and Néstor Kirchner of Argentina, and Lula of Brazil, and of course we all know a little bit about Chavez. The pressure is phenomenal that's being put on these people. Anyway, they're here. At last. They're hiding behind the books. They always hide behind words, you know? Well, I really don't want to dwell here tonight on the negative, and I've been talking a lot about the negative. Rather, I want to convince you that together we can change this situation, and we must change this situation. The key to transforming this situation is the power base of the corporatocracy, and that is the corporations. We must change our corporations. I have a few statistics to read to you here. With the help of government policies, the World Bank, the IMF, the World Trade Organization, foreign aid, and other institutions, our corporations manage to funnel 25% of the world's resources to 5% of the world's population, us living in the United States. And of course, a very small percentage of that 5% benefits the most. As a result, 24,000 people die every single day from starvation. Another 30,000, mostly children, die from curable diseases because we don't get them the medicines. More than half the world's population survives on less than $2 a day, not enough to provide the basic amenities that pre-Civil War plantation owners gave to their slaves. It's sad to say, but our corporations today do a great deal to keep wages very, very low. Their sweatshop workers receive less than those slaves. $2 a day doesn't buy you room and board in most of these countries, but the slaves get room and board. You and I are the beneficiaries of these policies, at least materialistically. Morally, we suffer deeply. And our children will suffer materialistically, and our grandchildren. The violence that swept through the World Trade Center and parts of Washington, and the violence in Iraq today are just the first shots across the bow unless we do something. We absolutely must transform the corporations because they're the power base. To do so, we have to first recognize that these corporations are extremely vulnerable. Corporations are extremely vulnerable. Every one of us needs to understand that corporations are completely dependent on us. We buy everything they make. And many of us work for them in one capacity or another, either as employees or as consultants or in some capacity. Furthermore, every single corporation is led by people who are worried about the future for their children. I know this for a fact. Well, I don't know every single CEO, but I've met a lot of them. They're all scared. They know about Osama bin Laden. They know what's going on in Latin America better than most of us, and they know that this world is in deep trouble, and they're scared for their children. I'd like to tell you a little anecdotal story here. A few years ago, a major NGO in this country went up against a huge international corporation on issues around forests. And the NGO sent people out to demonstrate against the corporation, hang flags and signs and banners from their office buildings, and do many things to disrupt them. And eventually the big corporation conceded and made a lot of the policy implementations that the NGO had requested. Several months after this, but in the process, the president of the NGO, senior vice president of the big corporation came head to head. They came to blows. They were nasty at each other. It was terrible. A few months after all this ended, I had the good fortune of, I think, of being at a conference in Santa Barbara, California. And on Saturday night of that weekend, I ended up sitting in a hot tub looking out over the Pacific Ocean with the president of the NGO and the senior vice president of the big international corporation. And to top it all off, we were all drinking beer and we were all naked. Now that makes for an interesting evening. I wonder what these two men who'd been stranglehold with each other for so long were going to do. And after a few beers and sitting there in that hot tub, the senior vice president of the big corporations said to the president of the NGO, "I want to thank you." Sends goosebumps up me. "I want to thank you for what you did." He said, "For many years, I felt strongly for my children and for everybody else that my corporation needed to be a better environmental steward, but I didn't feel I could do anything about it. I would have lost my job and been replaced by someone worse than me. When you and your people demonstrated against us, you sent the word to management. Then I could go out and push for real reforms." These corporations are very, very vulnerable. That's just one story. They're all equally as vulnerable. Who remembers, what was the corporation that overthrew, that instigated the overthrow of Salvador Allende of Chile? Anybody? ITT. What's it doing today? You never heard of it today. Doesn't exist. Bethlehem Steel doesn't exist. U.S. Steel doesn't exist. Pan American doesn't exist. Enron doesn't exist. Corporations are very, very vulnerable. We must transform them. As Barbara mentioned, I've also done a lot of work with indigenous people in the Amazon and other places, and one of the things we like to do there that helps to promote transformation is something that's called a journey, sometimes called, well, I don't want to use the word shaman because that scares a lot of people, but I would like to invite you now to take a little guided journey with me. It'll be very short and very easy. I'll walk you right through it, so if you just might close your eyes for a minute, just relax a little bit. And I want you to envision the modern corporation. So if you close your eyes, and what I'd like you to see is an octopus sitting on the United States. Its tentacles are reaching all around the planet to the very most remote corners of the planet. And it's using those tentacles to suck up resources from all over the planet. Feel what it would feel like for just a moment to be a peasant, a very poor person at the end of one of these tentacles, providing the resources that this octopus is sucking up to bring back to the United States. Just feel that for a moment. And feel the power of this great octopus, which is bringing all these resources for us here that we can live these very sumptuous, materialistic lives. And then think about, at the top of that octopus, there's a man who's making probably about 500 times the salary that his average employee is making. Just in salary. He has a lot more than that in assets. He's benefiting the most from all these resources being sucked up. And now I'd like you just to see the reverse, an alternative. There's that octopus is still there with all those tentacles reaching to the farthest corners of the planet, but it's sending resources out along those tentacles, primarily in the form of educating people about how to provide themselves with the basic amenities, and through health services, including family planning. It supports democratically elected officials, even those who suggest that revenues from local resources like oil be used to help local populations. In fact, this octopus, this alternative octopus, fights to implement trade rules aimed at using local resources to help local populations rather than making people in another country wealthier. It provides microcredit and training to fishermen, farmers, and family-run businesses of all kinds, small businesses. It defines its most important objective as being a good citizen, serving employees, clients, consumers, and the communities where they live. It plans for the long run and is a steward of the environment. Every decision this corporation makes is based on the recognition that everything on this planet is interdependent. Feel how that feels, to be part of that octopus. And the man and woman sitting at the top make a reasonable salary, but not one that's totally out of line with what everybody else makes. Feel that. Now when you're ready, you can slowly open your eyes and come back to reality. That is reality. That is the reality that we're going to create here. These two visions may seem diametrically opposed, but I think rather that they represent an evolutionary process, one that must happen. That second step is one that we have to take if we are going to survive on this planet as a species in the way that we know survival. We absolutely must do it. We must transform the corporations. And as a matter of fact, that second vision isn't all that new. My grandfather ran a small furniture store in New Hampshire, and his primary goal in life was to serve his community. Yes, he made some money for his family to eat and live in a decent home, but his primary concern was community service. And he was not unusual. In those days, many, many small businesses, at least where I came from in New Hampshire, were run with that in mind.